Hello, and welcome back to Pass the Popcorn, a series by the ANU School of Cybernetics, in which we review a movie and see what it can tell us about the complex systems that shape our lives. Today, we're looking at the 2010 film, The Social Network, which depicts the bold, if not controversial, beginnings of Facebook. Joanna's already laughing, so I can see we're going to have a great conversation about this. And in the film, we meet a young Mark Zuckerberg, newly dumped and bitter enough to create a website that ranks the hotness of his female peers. We follow his journey from that moment to some of his early Silicon Valley success, exploring legal entanglements, technology design, and broken relationships along the way. So I'm Ellen Broad. I'm a researcher here at the School of Cybernetics with a background in technology, policy, and data standards. And I'm joined today by Joanna Weaver, who's the new director of the ANU Tech Policy Design Centre. And I'm really thrilled that you could join us. And I also wanted to, before we move into the discussion of the film, acknowledge that we're both having this discussion on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and to pay my respects to elders past and present who might be listening today and who are around us in Canberra. So, Joanna, what did you think of the film?
Oh, I have to be honest, I really didn't love it. And if I wasn't watching it for this amazing film festival, I probably wouldn't have made it through the first half an hour. I thought it was an incredibly self-indulgent portrayal, and reflecting upon it, I think it really, it makes me remark upon the change of zeitgeist, I guess, from 2010 to where we are today. And this was a film about, it wasn't about Facebook, it was about Mark Zuckerberg, and the conversation has moved on so substantially since then.
I noticed that as a bit of a trend running through the film, as well as Zuckerberg's it is a fictionalized portrayal, but if I can lean into it a little bit, a ill tolerance for frameworks inside the university, rules around his enrollment as a student, expectations and etiquette in his discussions with the Winklevoss twins. When you look at those dynamics in the film, is that why, we've seen Facebook's evolution continue to run ahead of, or perhaps completely break, policy expectations and regulatory norms?
Yeah, well, I mean, Facebook's motto, which is famous, is move fast and break things, right? And they've since revised that motto, and it no longer exists scrolled on their wall. I think that prioritization of connecting people, and when you look, and I actually haven't gone back, but looking at the commentary around this time, it was that Facebook was going to connect the world. We were going to democratize the world through Facebook. That was very much the narrative. Whereas if you look at it now, actually, the very openness and the connections, but then added to that with the algorithms and the way that we have Facebook promoting division rather than promoting cohesion, and actually it's undermining many of our democratic processes. So the very opposite of what it was initially claiming that it was going to be doing. I think the question of regulatory frameworks, obviously this is a real passion of mine. I wouldn't have established the Tech Policy Design Centre if it wasn't. And a big part of the motivation for establishing this research unit within ANU is that it's very clear, whether you're looking at Facebook or other types of technologies, that the policy and regulatory frameworks that we have today they are struggling to keep up. Whether they're struggling or failing is a question for debate, but I think it is it's not a controversial thing to say that they're struggling. And these the way that technology is impacting our lives, the way that it is integrated into our lives, and frankly, the way that we are dependent on technology now. If we don't have regulatory frameworks that keep pace, then we are actually at risk of not just regulatory failure, but frankly, societal failure. It's because these things are so ingrained in what we are doing. So we have to change the way that we are making, designing, and implementing regulation to be able to keep up with people like the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Facebooks. Who knows what tomorrow's Facebook is going to be? Maybe it'll be the metaverse. But there is no excuse for us to not innovate the way that we regulate. And we can claim that we were caught off guard by the rapid pace of expansion of Facebook. I don't think we can claim that anymore.
Is motivation or intent something that should matter in the design of a technology? Because you've kind of drawn a through line from that early motivation to some of this impacts at scale today. But how would we capture motivation or start to look at it more closely?
Well, I think the first thing, and when it comes to complex systems, Ellen, you're much more an authoritative voice than I, but I think the first thing is to stop thinking about pieces of technology as individual pieces of technology and start thinking about those pieces of technology, how they fit into, how they connect to other pieces of technology and how they fit into our lives. And this film looks at the piece of technology. It doesn't look at the flow-on impacts or the way that it fits into and impacted frankly, the evolution of a whole generation of other technologies. And that's really interesting because there's some surveys coming out of the US at the moment saying, when you are examining and looking at does technology make your day-to-day life easier? Yes, it does. Your online shopping, your being able to use your iPhone and the GPS and all of these things. But then when you ask people, does technology actually make your life better? An overwhelming number of people are now starting to say no. And that's really alarming. So I think what we need to do, well, actually, it's heartening, but alarming at the same time. It's heartening that people are awakening to the fact that just because technology is making your life easier doesn't mean it's making your life better. So I think in terms of motivation, our fundamental motivation in the design of technology has to be that we have technology that makes our lives better and easier.
Yes, it's interesting. You mentioned that we need technology frameworks and regulations to shape and influence the way platforms like Facebook are designed. Like, has anything changed, or actually could Facebook just scale up as quickly and as rapidly and with all of these effects today?
I think it depends on where you are. If you're in China, no. If you're in Australia, I don't think our regulatory frameworks have changed significantly that they would prevent this. But actually, it's not the regulatory frameworks that are driving the shape of the companies. It's actually more the finance. It's when you're looking at these types of companies, getting them quickly to scale relies on venture capital, for example, and that model requires you to get return on investment. You need money to be flowing back in, and then you're quickly scaling into a shareholder model, and they also require return on investment. And so you're looking to capitalize. The way that you capitalize, the way that Facebook has found it, is via advertising. So I actually think in that sense that the thing that has changed slightly, but I don't think enough, but I'm optimistic that it will continue to, because I think there's a real groundswell behind it, is that it's actually consumer demand for a different type of product. And that's where the agency piece comes into play. It's actually saying to people, we shouldn't have to have a binary choice between using Facebook or having no ability to connect with friends and et cetera around the world. And it's not until there's enough of us that are demanding another model and potentially willing to pay a subscription, for example, to make it a model that is worthwhile financing the expansion, et cetera, and getting it to scale so that it has the benefits, because obviously it's a social network. Its benefit comes from its network.
It's a really interesting point. with my last question, I wanted to go back to a quote from the film that actually came from Sean Parker, who in the film was the founder of Napster, where he says at one point, I think, to Mark Zuckerberg, something like, and he's talking about his own platform. He says, Napster wasn't a failure. I changed the music industry for better and for always. Is it possible to have something simply be better and for always as a product?
Well, look, I think it has changed the way we live for always. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think it has changed it for the better. I think it, on the individual level, for many individuals, it may have. And actually, I had this conversation over the dinner table with two friends last night. And I said, for you, is Facebook a net benefit or a net negative? And for both of them, they said it was a net positive, that it actually, their ability to connect with friends and family and over long distances, this is a net positive. But both of them then took a deep breath and said, and talked about all of these societal implications, from the individual through communities, through to erosion of democracies. And the misinformation, disinformation around the pandemic, for example, came up in multiple conversations. And I think everyone kind of goes, you can't in good conscience say that has changed it for the better for always. But I think this is a moment in time where we have the ability to pull this back and to say, okay, how do we make it for better? And I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier about we need technology that makes our lives better, not just easier. I believe it is possible to design that type of technology, and I believe it is possible to build frameworks to encourage that, to incentivize it. And that's why I'm so excited. I think the work that Cybernetics is doing is very much in that vein, and it's likewise with the Tech Policy Design Centre. That's why we're here, because we are committed to technology. Technology is and should be a force for good, but we all need to play a role in demanding that technology be made differently.
Thank you so much for your time, Joanna. I know that you had strong opinions watching the film, but I'm actually really glad that you watched it because it's what allowed us to have this excellent conversation. So thank you. Don't miss our next installment of Pass the Popcorn. We'll be turning our minds to the environmental side of cybernetics and talking about the gorgeous film Princess Mononoke, a Studio Ghibli film, I'm pretty sure. If you're keen to know more about cybernetics, don't forget to check out our website. See you next time.
And we pass the popcorn to the next ones.
Yeah.